War is always bad and it is always a sacrifice, which is why no one will just start it. You need a good reason to declare war, don't you? As you probably realize from the title of this video, wars can be not for real reasons, but for example because of a bowl of soup. But about that a little later. There are some strange cases in the history of war, and that's what we'll tell you about today. Don't forget to make tea and pancakes and subscribe to this channel, like it and click the bell so you don't miss our exciting new videos. Now back to our bowl of soup. The War of the Soup Bowl. For more than a century, the Northern Netherlands was independent, while the Southern Netherlands was under the control of the Holy Roman Empire. The first used the Scheldt River for navigation, while the second had no access to it. Because of this, the United Provinces prospered, while the Southerners, on the contrary, had no fun at all. In 1784, Joseph II, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, decided that he could no longer tolerate the arbitrariness of the North and that he wanted to drive his merchant ships down the river as well. In general, Majesty could have simply asked politely, but it was apparently below his dignity. So he outfitted a group of 3 armed ships, led by the ship Louise, and sent for the Dutch to put them in their place. The emperor was sure that the insolent man dared not offer any resistance. Fortunately, they did not even have normal artillery. However, the Dutch did not need it. As soon as the Louise reached the Northern Netherlands on the Scheldt, the warship Dolphin was sent to catch it. Events then unfolded as follows. The Dolphin fires 1 cannon shot. The cannonball smashes a soup bowl of hot food on the deck of the Louise. Its crew immediately surrenders. That's it. Why? It's scary, in case somebody gets killed. Having lost his flagship, the emperor became furious and sent an army to the Netherlands. The brave soldiers seized the old fort of Lilo. The port had long been abandoned and used as a vegetable garden. They blew up the dams standing there and caused a flood with fatalities. The Dutch turned to France, which at the time was an ally of Joseph II. The French, seeing what the Austrian emperor had done, forced him to begin negotiations with the Netherlands. Austria ended up paying the Dutch 9.5 million guilders in compensation for the riots and $500,000 for the flood damage. In addition, the Netherlands continued to control the Scheldt and charge duties to all who sailed there. So, the Holy Roman Empire was put to shame, having lost a considerable sum and the soup bowl in the war with Holland and achieving nothing in the end. The War of the Bird Dung. Officially, this armed conflict, which occurred in December 1878 between Chile and Bolivia, was called the Second Pacific War. Unofficially, it was called the Silete War, or the War for Bird Dung. Guano, that is bird and bat feces, was one of the main exports of Bolivia and neighboring countries. It could be used to produce saltpeter, which served as a fertilizer for crops. More importantly, it was used in the production of gunpowder. The Chilean government, under British patronage, extracted guano in huge quantities and sent it to Europe. Bolivian ruling elites, on a bribe from the British, gave the Chileans the right to extract raw materials tax-free. For a long time, Bolivia's main national wealth was pumped out and shipped over the ocean by the ton. But suddenly, the Bolivian parliament decided that it was enough to stand for it and taxed the guano extraction. And when outraged Chileans and British refused to pay, the Bolivians simply confiscated all the company's property. Chilean President Aníbal Pinto took over the Bolivian town of Antofagasta because 90% of its 5,348 inhabitants were Chilean. Bolivia declared war on Chile. Peru joined the conflict on Bolivia's side. Victory eventually went to Chile because Britain was behind it, and the guano mining continued on the same terms. Bolivia lost 25,000 men, killed and wounded, and other 9,000 captured. The province of Antofagasta never returned to it, so the Bolivians also lost their access to the sea, which they still can't come to terms with. To this day, they celebrate Navy Day to remember that the coast of Antofagasta once belonged to them. In honor of this, Bolivian women dye their eyelashes blue and dress their children in tank tops. War over a bakery. In 1828, a wave of civil unrest and looting traditionally swept through the sunny Mexico City. One of the victims of the Mexican officers was a French immigrant named Remontel. His small bakery was robbed. Mexican authorities received a petition for damages from the victim, which they promptly ignored. So Remontel asked the French government for compensation. Officials accepted the petition and pushed it away among thousands of similar letters that no one had much intention of answering to begin with. There it lay for 10 years until it happened to catch the eye of King Louis Philippe himself. He read the message and was indignant. How is it the French subjects are offended? Look what they're thinking. Bring here a globe, we'll look for this Mexico. Then again, France was actively trading with Mexico, and it was taxed more than the States. Something had to be done about it. The king commanded to combine business with pleasure, to show Remontel that his homeland had not forgotten him, and to bring the Mexicans to heel. Anyway, in October 1838, the French fleet arrived in Mexico and set up a siege on the city of Veracruz. France demanded that the Mexican government pay for the destruction of the bakery. A sum of 60,000 pesos was announced, with the fact that Remontel's bakery was valued at somewhere around 1,000 pesos. And the rest, well, that's 10 years of interest accrued. Mexico refused to pay. Then the ships began shelling the citadel of San Juan de Ulua, putting 224 defenders dead and wounded. The Mexicans threw everything they had into the fight with the French. The famous general Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna even returned from retirement to lead the defense of Veracruz. But it did not work out. The Mexicans, under British pressure, signed a peace treaty. The country was forced to pay as much as 600,000 pesos, or 3 million francs, 10 times the amount originally demanded. Mexico agreed to the conditions imposed, but still paid nothing. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, fighting the French, got his leg shot off with buckshot, and he buried the lost limb with military honors. Perhaps in his heart he wondered if it was worth it to come back from retirement if things had turned out so badly in the end. In 1870, the French Empire finally ended, and the conflict with Mexico was forgotten. And Remontel, whom all the fuss was supposedly about, never got anything for his ruined bakery. The War on Jenkins Ear. In 1738, a British sailor named Robert Jenkins appeared before Parliament. He showed the House of Commons his ear, preserved in a jar, and gave a dramatically detailed account of how he lost it. 7 years ago, his ship was returning from the West Indies. It had been stopped by a Spanish patrol ship on suspicion of smuggling. Although there was no blame on the crew, a Spanish Coast Guard officer snatched Jenkins' ear off with his saber to show what happens to smugglers. Returning home, Jenkins filed a complaint with the Crown. His testimony was forwarded to the Duke of Newcastle. He forwarded them to the Commander-in-Chief of the colonies in the West Indies. The commander in turn sent an account of Jenkins' misfortunes to the Governor of Havana. So the seller's complaint wandered through the courts for 7 years, until finally Britain needed a reason for war with Spain. It was a territorial dispute over Florida, and the empire over which the sun never sets instantly remembered that her subject was offended. In fact, the whole ear thing was a bit of a mess. Jenkins was constantly confused about the details. He might have had his ear cut off by Captain Juan de Leon Frandino, or by certain Lieutenant Dorset, or some kind of Fandino, or the Spanish tied him to the mast before committing this cruelty, or cut him off in a scuffle. They called the ship Guardacosta or La Isabella. Even the name of the victim was confused from report to report. Sometimes he was Robert, sometimes he was Charles. But the British government turned away from this nonsense. There is a sailor, there is no ear. The Spanish are kind of to blame. Let's go to war and then we'll sort it out. At the end of 1739, Britain began a 2-year war in Florida, which belonged to Spain. Then they fought in Venezuela. They had naval battles in the Caribbean, fought with the Spanish and the French over the territories of a weakened Austria. In general, the mass in which some 25,000 people were killed or wounded dragged on. The conflict jokingly called the Jenkins Ear War, ended only in 1748. The severed body part was long forgotten. Spain and Britain made peace. The treaties were signed, and nothing had really changed. Whether the showdown was worth it at all is a mystery. Certainly, these were the strangest cases of war, but there is no getting around it now. You can't cancel it. However, the future can be changed. The future of this channel depends on you, dear viewers. We will be happy if you subscribe to our channel, like it, and click on the bell. Please tell us which situation from today's reel seemed the strangest to you. We wish you a pancake mood and see you again.